It is Neil Atkinson with Josh Williams on Talking Reds in our Trends-esque style before the season starts. Me and Josh are going to be doing a show for subscribers all the way through the season on statistical trends and the way in which they're working. Josh has written a very, very good book about Liverpool. There's another very good book about Liverpool out today by Ian Graham. And there's current controversy about Liverpool and the way in which they want to go about their transfer business, i.e. the idea that only Martin Zubimendi would be able to improve Liverpool's midfield ranks to the extent to which they feel as though it's investing money in. I think this is the first thing you argue in your book and is supported by what Ian's put in his, Josh, is this idea that at least back then, Liverpool had a real sense that they were prepared to invest money if they thought it was really going to move the needle. You discussed the importance of goal difference. There's more metrics to it than that. But I think that this is, for me, the first difficult and almost, well, it is partially controversial point is precisely what difference does every individual person think a signing will make and how they come to those conclusions before you even get to the idea of what they are or aren't profiling for.
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, when it comes to the start of, say, for example, Klopp's tenure, it was a lot easier because obviously you had a squad that was, what, 60 point squad or something like that at the start of Klopp's tenure. So you had lots of improvement there to easily make, you know, by signing the likes of a Wijnaldum and a Matip, and obviously Mane was a good signing, but you could sign players that were just decent, really, and Klopp could kind of get more out of them and stuff, and you'd kind of climb the table in that way. But I think now we're in a position where I think the better Liverpool have got, the better the squad has got, the more we've seen this kind of analytical approach to you only sign players based on the impact they can have on points, based on the impact they can have on your goal difference. Well, Liverpool are now just a really high-scoring team in those departments. So now to get a player who's making a difference, the pool, according to Liverpool especially, is just really, really small, isn't it?
Do you accept that? Do you agree with it? Do you think it's a fair argument?
Sometimes I agree. I've said all along that the six market is not very good. I think my problem with it now is if you've shown your hand and you've shown that you're willing to compromise and buy a player like Zubimendi, who is good, 7 out of 10 in every department, no major weaknesses, but is not a world beater, is not a Rodri. If you're going to say there's no sixes out there who are good enough, sound, but then if you say Zubimendi's good enough, you have players, in my opinion, around Zubimendi who are about that level. So if you're going to move for him and you're not going to move for anyone else, that for me is weird. A little bit weird anyway.
What I find difficult for this summer is that, first and foremost, to be really clear about this, City have got, and they're the benchmark. City have got 19 players for this season. As it stands, they might go into the market to replace Alvarez. That 19, though, includes McAtee, Rico Lewis and Bob. And I saw some of McAtee last season, thought he looked hardy. You never know, he might be able to go up a level with better players. I think Lewis looks exceptional, given his age. And Bob's been impressive in the snatches and supposedly had a very good pre-season, but now he's got his injury, so they're now down to 18 at least probably until Christmas. Yeah. City, and that's what they're moving with. But there are 18 players who are hugely multifunctional. And first and foremost, there's a question is, do we actually think our players are more multifunctional than the previous manager allowed them to be? Is that something that's in Liverpool's mindset? The second is, do Liverpool think that size of squad is the size of squad that you want? The third thing is, I think, is an adjunct to both of those things, with the reality of the way the season's going to be, with more Champions League games, tougher Champions League games earlier, does that do the job? My argument at the minute is not so much that I want Liverpool to have depth. I think depth could be a bit of a secret weapon this season. And quality depth, don't get me wrong, but depth, I think what your first 11 looks like and how you improve your first 11 on the 14th of August is completely different to the reality of what your first 11 out is on the 14th of December. And that's where I'm sort of looking at it at the minute a little bit like, there must be players who can add to this.
Yeah, I agree, but I think a lot of it, and this is a bit of a boring answer, but it feels like a lot of it might come down to just Slot's ability to get his players available compared to the previous regime. That's something that Pep seems to do really well. Arteta seems to do it really, really well, where his best players are just available all the time. So you haven't really got to suffer too much of a rotation, too much of a drop in quality. All of his players seem to play 90-minute spells, don't they, under Pep? And then they'll miss the next game maybe or something like that, and he seems to do it completely differently to the average manager. So if Slot can can get his players available as often as they were available at Feyenoord, that'll do a lot for Liverpool, just having depth. But I am with you. I think, you know, just gradually as the window's gone on, I have been, you know, patient throughout and things. I think assessing the squad in America was the right thing to do, giving everyone a proper crack at the whip and stuff like that. But I do think we're at a point now where there is strengthening to be done, and I think with the sixth market it's not great, but you've shown your hand with Zubamendi as that you're willing to accept a certain level. I think you can get that level of midfielder elsewhere other than just Zubamendi. I think there's probably a need for a centre half as well. I think we've all probably been in agreement with that for quite a while now, and you know, the forward line remains open for debate, considering we do currently have 5 top quality options there. It's whether you want to add that 6th, whether you want to get in that 6th ahead of losing one of the current 5 in the next 12 months. Seen the rumours around the goalkeeper, that situation, but I don't think it's a case of Liverpool standing still. I do think there's maybe a bit of complexity in there that a lot of supporters maybe are overlooking, but I do think Liverpool can strengthen. I don't think it's as much of a impossible job as being made out a little bit.
In the comments, the God Almighty says Zubamendi implies we're looking for a style of 6 that prioritises press resistance over defensive ability. Who else might fit that profile? I mean, before you go there, this is the point of my profiling question as well, which is, I agree with that. I think that they are looking for press resistance over almost everything else. I think they have been for a while, by the way. I think Endo's an outlier. I think Gravenberch is press resistant. I think that Szoboszlai is meant to be press resistant. I think McAllister's press resistant. I think they've turned Curtis Jones into one of the most press resistant footballers in the world a long period. So I don't think this is something where it's different now under Slot than it was under Klopp. I think that's been there for a significant period of time. But I think they are looking for press resistance, aren't they? I think they're looking for composure as well. I think they're looking for the idea of someone who's able to keep his cool if all around are losing theirs and are sending it a bit long. What do you think they are when you say Zubamendi and they could get others like him? What do you think they are looking to profile first and foremost?
Well, I think beforehand under Klopp, obviously we were accustomed to our holding midfielder in a midfield 3 being kind of isolated a bit more on his own, with 2 8s, you know, usually a little bit further ahead. The ball was just in the air a lot more with Jurgen Klopp. It was a lot more of a basketball game, a lot more transition. So I think the 6 just had a bit more of a destructive element about him. I don't think he had to be particularly serene on the ball, although Fabinho was just very good in possession anyway. I think in comparison...
But he was playing well. And there's a really interesting Fabinho thing. I think you can actually literally correlate how well Fabinho is playing simply down to his passing. If he's pinging it around nicely, when he was playing progressions, he was playing better than when he wasn't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
When he was confident.
Yeah. But I think compared to the new regime, I think the 6 is just a conductor. I think is the easiest way of putting it. I think he has to be a bit of a master of the first phase, get you out to the build-up phase as a means of like almost escaping your own defensive third. And then once you're out of there, you're flying and you're gone, because that's when you're accelerating the game and stuff. And if you're going to get pressed high, which we've seen happen to Liverpool during pre-season, I just think we've seen a few players in there who've looked like they've been learning that side of the game on the job almost. And I think if you're just going to make things a lot easier for everyone, accelerate their progression under Klopp, under Slot a bit quicker, it just makes a lot more sense to get someone in there who is maybe not as much of a destructive 6, but is just far more, just got a lot more of a feel for the ball, a lot more comfortable when he's under pressure, 360 vision and all that.
You're not just describing McAllister here though. One of the things I think is interesting is I think that, for instance, he's been playing with 2 deeper, and McAllister does this job at Brighton next to Caicedo. Caicedo to his right, McAllister to the left. And I wonder whether or not almost one of the issues here is that all the way through last season when McAllister was playing next to Endo, McAllister played more to the left. I thought McAllister struggled a little bit when he played more to the right, like he almost wants to be able to open his body and look that way, if you see what I mean, with his right foot. But a lot of what you're describing there is McAllister, if you see what I mean. Like if you could have another McAllister who played off the right. But I think there's something else as well, where Liverpool are almost happy with the idea of Robertson or the left back going, and then the idea of the right back supplementing, but they almost want that additional security for the right back on that right hand side as well. So I think there's a little. I think there are nuances to it, but I do think that and this is where I think this is where if Liverpool were watching this, and I hope to God they're not, they've got other things to do, but they'd be saying, yeah, but we feel we've got a lot of what you've just described in there, and this is back to profile and the idea that whoever comes in punches us up, but we think we've got some of what you're saying there.
Well, I would agree. I would agree with them, because I've pushed a lot of that myself. Even in the Sevilla game, you saw elements of that from Gravenberch. Gravenberch looked pretty at home. I thought he was really, really good. I think one slight comparison in comparison to McAllister, though, I think he's just a bit more vertical with his passing. I think he's just naturally attack-minded. McAllister a little bit, naturally a bit creative. Sometimes the first phase player, that conductor, that Jorginho, is just a bit more emphasised on keeping the ball and just being a bit of a glue guy in there and just having a bit of experience at doing it almost. Do you see what I mean? Where it's just natural for the player to get you out of that build-up phase. And McAllister's good at it, definitely. I think he could do it. I think he's a solution in there if we don't sign a player. But getting in a Zubimendi, he was just a plug and play. Was what we were saying last week, weren't it? Like a plug and play option that you just slot in there, sort of that type of thing, and then he maybe gets more out of McAllister, who can play a little bit higher, a little bit towards the final third, a little bit more, or something like that.
When you talk about that, I think that's a key part of this, and why I think this position, why there are, when we're trying to work out a profile, whether or not they're a bit like, this is as much about the idea though of the glue, that we've got to feel as though it works with everyone else. That I think that, for instance, you did a really good piece on your Substack addressing the idea that if Liverpool wanted another player, attacker in the final third, especially a wide attacker in the final third, and you went through a series of parameters and got this list smaller and smaller, and that's how you did it.
Yeah. And
I think that makes, I think that's an easier thing to do in attack. I think when you get something like what you're describing as a glue guy, I think that trying to work out what you think the glue is, or what sort of value you think that the glue has, what bits need to be glued more than others almost, is I think that's what makes this profile, this idea of working that out, a little bit different as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that the process is still really similar though. Like, I think criteria wise, you're still looking at a player who is under the age of 26 and things like that, but I think profiling what he does on the ball is generally a bit easier now, I think, probably compared to a Klopp DM, because using numbers to identify what a player's doing defensively is hard. It always has been. It's kind of shades of grey in there. But I think profiling what a player's doing on the ball, like I released a scatter plot last week, just a really simple one. Just on one axis was passing accuracy, just a player's ability to keep the ball, and on the bottom axis was just how many progressive passes is he hitting. And if you show it well on that, you're keeping the ball a lot and you're moving the ball forward a lot. Simple as that. And I think, to an extent, that's what we're after now with this new fella. Keeping the ball and accelerating it forward, moving the game forward when you can, when the opportunity's there. Basically a Thiago almost. But he has to have, I think it'd be nice if he had that kind of loan experience, which a lot of them don't. And McAllister certainly, well, I suppose he did after last season, but he kind of emerged as that option with Caicedo holding his hand next to him, so it's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky, but I don't think it's, people are saying here, asking about names. I want to come on to another couple of things in a minute. By the way, we are, as part of this Talking Reds, we're with NordVPN. If you go to nordvpn.com/TAW, you get their offer, which gives you a mega discount and 4 extra months all the way through. Gets you all the online security you could possibly ask for, and the opportunity to engage in media from other markets. We are one of those, I suppose. It's worth pointing that out as well, but there is a ton of them, and it protects your data and protects you on public Wi-Fi. So if you do want to sign up, we would like you to do so, and you can get it across 10 devices as well. So it's nordvpn.com/TAW for that. And as I say, these Talking Reds that we're doing on this run are because of Nord support, and we very much do appreciate it. So if you could support them, that would be very, very kind of you indeed. To go back to this profile and point though, and this is so people are then saying, well, what are the names? Because I think it's interesting, because you actually you went from saying there it's the idea of the forward pass, but McAllister's got the forward pass, but we don't just want the forward pass, you want the other ones as well. For me, I think it's about the pressured pass. and they're not giving it away. He performs unbelievably well, Zubamendi, on turnovers. He's hard to get past, performs unbelievably well on turnovers, pressured pass is pretty good. And if you're going to invite that in, I think that's one of the things that they're looking at, that sort of balance. But then that throws open people like our old friend Andre Trindade, we were talking about it before we started, because Fulham are still interested. And I'm quite, his pressured pass percentage is outrageous how good it is. It really is like 91, 92% at times, how many passes he completes when he's under pressure. But then he's less physically imposive, doesn't win his headers, so on and so forth. What I'm saying here is, who are your names? Then if you're saying if you open up Zubamendi, you open up more, who's in the more as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on whether we're talking about, is this fella a lone six? Do you know what I mean? Because I've kind of likened what Slot has been doing to a midfield 2. It looks like a midfield 2 to me.
I think it's a midfield 2.
But I have a feeling, though, if you asked him, I think he'd still call it a 3, and I think he'd just make out one of the 8s really high. I honestly think that's what he'd say. But
I think he thinks it's 3 midfielders.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I think so that's the thing. I think he says it's 3 midfielders. It's just they happen to be playing here and here.
Yeah.
But I think it is. But the 2 are a partnership, as far as I'm concerned, a partnership.
I agree, and considering that, specifically that, I think that opens up some of the options. Like a player I mentioned in the gutter just before was Maxence Kakara from Lyon. I think he's a player who offers very similar perks to a Zubamendi. Good on the dribble, good at getting out of tight spaces, really nice feel for the ball, good first touch. He's got that kind of agility about him, good passer, things like that. But I think he's also about 23, 3 years left on his contract. I think he has, maybe he's 24. But one thing you find with players like the one I've just described, and Zubamendi, Jorginho, what's the theme there? That they're all really slight, slender, borderline lightweight. I think a player we mentioned last week off air, and I am not putting this player forward now, I'm going to be clear on this, but someone who you would technically say fits the bill of what we're after is a Billy Gilmore. Someone like that who's just a natural at receiving the ball in the deepest area to the park when he's under pressure, and he'll get you out of it, but might get bullied. Ideally, you want someone who won't get bullied, and that's what makes it tricky. Another one is Alan Varela. I think is at Porto, but he's only been there for a year. And a bit more of a destructive kind of option would be someone like a Florentino Luis, who's at Benfica. But then, would he just kind of show up a little bit like Endo's shown up, where he just looks like a little bit uncomfortable, basically? But
isn't a big part? But the fella's been brought in, and this is where both we need to have trust. But I'm almost wondering internally if there needs to be a bit more trust. The fella's been brought in as a head coach. Yeah, it's the idea he's there to get the best out of players, and this is back to why I still want to see Liverpool sign 3 players, is because, and if you've got to make a compromise here and there, make a compromise here and there, because back the fella, you brought him in. You brought him in because he's meant to be brilliant on the training ground. He's very good at getting the best out of players, putting them in situations, and whilst I think the supporter base needs to trust, if he feels as though we can go forwards with some combination of the lads who are already there and make it work, I think we've got to trust him to do that. But I also wonder whether or not, if the idea is you've always got to buy for someone who come right in and improve the first 11 and pull on the goal difference and etc. I think one of the things that improves the goal difference and improves the points is availability, is having numbers and availability. And again, to your point, it might be, well, he's going to keep more of them fit. To me, that feels like more of a gamble than going and buying someone who we might be able to coach into being 10% better at one area. So improve 10% of Florentino Luis's ability to play on the half turn. Do you know what I mean? And this is where this is all this push and pull, and that's why I don't like the idea that Liverpool are definitively, well, there was only this one who could make us better on the one hand. I also don't like the season's fucked now because we haven't bought a holding midfielder on the other, because the point is we brought in a head coach to do the coaching in both directions.
Yeah, I think with the Luis thing as well, what you just mentioned there about receiving on the half term, one thing I've noticed with Slot, watching a lot of pre-season, and I've watched a lot of like the inside training videos that Liverpool put up on YouTube and stuff, and Slot seems to me like a really tactical coach. The way he's addressing the way a player's receiving the ball, and his decision making once he's on the ball, and the shape of his body and stuff. And it felt like Klopp was never particularly that way inclined. Maybe that was a bit more Linda's, but that's some kind of impact that you can certainly have if you're getting in a player who's a bit less technical. But the availability thing, that's one of the reasons why I mentioned Kakara. He plays a lot of minutes for Lyon. Zubimendi played virtually every game for Real Sociedad. So I think if you're going to go for Zubimendi and you're not going to get him, that to me says you are willing to, not settle, maybe that's the wrong word, but I think what I'm getting at is there's players out there who are relatively comparable to Zubimendi that you could probably look at. Yeah. Whereas in the past, maybe with a Van Dijk, alright, Sam, wait 6 months for Van Dijk, no issue with that at all. With Zubimendi, you can probably still go and get someone.
I've just got a little radar up here. Sadly, we can't put it on the screen, unfortunately, but it's Florentino Luis in the 22-23 season, where his pressure pass percentage is 83%. He's 85th percentile against the top 5 leagues for turnovers. Brilliant on tackles, brilliant on interceptions. Feels like he's someone who could work, but then it becomes a matter of, and this is where I have got sympathy with Liverpool, is amounts. This is where I think, the idea that, for me, wanting an extra body is, and thinking you can get a really good one who could add something in a couple of areas, but unless you're sure it's an absolute belter, if you're talking upwards of 60 and 70 million, which Benfica will probably look to push for a couple of their players at the minute, and also now don't need to because they've sold one to PSG for a good whack this summer as well. This is where I do think I've got a bit of sympathy and it does get difficult.
I was going to say, with João Neves, is there any part of you that wonders why we win, or is it just purely because of PSG?
I think it's purely because PSG.
Because of the financials and that.
But also, I think that there's time. I think more and more these days you see the transfers, and they have been coming for 6 to 12 months. You've been working on this, building a relationship, so on and so forth. And I think we were just behind the curve on it, possibly. But yeah, I think he's another one who could have happened, but it ends up going to big money PSG and going from there. I think with all of this, and begin to sort of round it off. As I say, I'll say again, I think that you can. There's more than one way to do it, and this is back to trusting the coach. And I know people don't like it when I say you could use Gravenberch deeper, and Szoboszlai deeper, and I also include Szoboszlai on that list. I don't think Szoboszlai likes it either, but there's a history of footballers being forced to go and do a job. One of the most admired holding midfielders of the last 10 years, Fernandinho, first signed for Manchester City, he doesn't play there. Yeah. He gets moved there over a period of time. There's tons of this as well, and that's down to coaching. That's back to the idea of coaching the principles into the players.
But this is something that Pep does a lot. He does it all the time. He finds players who are supposedly forwards or attacking midfielders or whatever. And what you'll find that he does a lot is just move them back a slot in the pitch. And they end up, we saw like a game last season, I think it was. Bernardo Silva plays left back, mate.
Yeah.
Just things like that. Like you've got players like Kevin De Bruyne playing in double pivots and stuff like that. Years and years ago, before De Bruyne meets Pep, that doesn't happen. So Liverpool do have a really versatile squad. We do have bodies, we do have options, and we've just got to hope we've got a really good coach who can find solutions basically. But on top of that, it would be nice if we helped them out in the market too.
Well, I think if you even if you move someone, you need to buy someone. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
For instance, if you do what I have been suggesting, which is use Szoboszlai deeper, then I think you need to find someone else who's going to compete for number 10 with. Well, I call it number 10. The manager might call it number 8. But that role with Elliott, I think you need to find someone else who competes with Elliott for that role. If you see what I mean. And I think that you can sort of keep doing that. You can say, well, all right, if we move him there, then for instance, if we were to decide, and I don't think we should, Trent's going to play there, then we need to go and buy a right back. So exactly. For me, it's none of this is don't invest. I think you can be creative, but I still think you need to invest. I still think they need to get 3 players in. Ideally, that's what I'd like to do to sustain them through the long season. And I think that's what Van Dijk was getting at as well when he was speaking. This is long and hard. You need the numbers.
Yeah. It is weird. Like, I mean, this kind of plan B stuff as well. The idea that we've only ever got a plan A, and if the plan A falls through, there's no plan B. But the whole point of the transfer market, the whole idea is you navigate, turbulent waters where the floor's always changing, the floor's always shifting and things like that. Very rarely do you get your first man. Very rarely does the window go exactly how you plan it to go. So usually it's the way in which you react that gets you out of there. Like I think wasn't Wijnaldum a relatively late signing in the window, and I think Matip was just kind of like a casual clock in the corridor saying have a look at him.
Yeah.
And Edwards went and had a look at him and said, yeah, ticks the boxes, Sam, we'll go and get him. Mane arrives 6 months after we failed to sign Alex Teixeira from Shakhtar Donetsk, was he?
Yeah.
Somewhere like that. So I think the idea is, having these contingency plans in place, and if Liverpool hadn't this window, it would be a little bit surprising if we just literally don't get anyone.
There we are. More than a little bit surprising, I think it is fair to say. Josh Williams, Neil Atkinson, Talking Reds in conjunction with NordVPN. We'll see you next time.
A VPN, short for Virtual Private Network, is a cybersecurity tool for privacy and security. When you connect to it, a VPN creates a secure tunnel and secures data traveling between you and the VPN server. Encryption scrambles data, so to anyone outside the encrypted tunnel, the information looks like gibberish, meaning no snoops can sneak a peek at your online activity. NordVPN ensures that you can browse safely and privately in just a few clicks.